Ladies and gentlemen, it is official that Kyle Lowry is returning for his 20th and final season at the NBA and returning to the Philadelphia 76ers. This was a move that the writing has been on the wall for quite some time, an inevitable signing that this franchise was set to make, but does go against some of the philosophy that Daryl Morey did push at the start of the offseason. I do want to break down what Kyle Lowry can still bring to the table for this Sixers team, how up in arms I am about something that I think we all knew was coming, particularly after the fact when VJ Edgecombe elected to rep 77 instead of 7 for his jersey. A little bit of meaning behind that there, but weigh the pros and cons of what Lowry can bring from a leadership perspective versus sacrificing a roster spot that could have gone to a younger, more athletic, and frankly, a player that can contribute at a higher rate. But let's get right into the topic today. I do want to start out with the Shams report here that says free agent guard Kyle Lowry has agreed to a one-year deal to return to the Philadelphia 76ers. Mark Bartelstein of Priority Sports tells ESPN. The 2019 champion is back for his 20th NBA season and a third consecutive year with his hometown Philadelphia 76ers. Now, to give a little bit of love to Kyle Lowry here, he will become the 12th player in NBA history to play 20-plus seasons and only the second point guard to ever do it. That includes Vince Carter, LeBron James, Robert Parrish, Kevin Willis, Kevin Garnett, Dirk Nowitzki, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kobe Bryant, Jamal Crawford, Udonis Haslem, Chris Paul, and now Kyle Lowry. Now, for Kyle specifically, have a great deal of respect for everything this dude has done throughout his NBA career. Again, a local product, a guy who grew up in Philadelphia here, and I think it definitely meant something him to return to his hometown team and rep Philadelphia like that. He obviously went to Cardinal Doherty, went to Villanova there, and now is having a chance to represent the Philadelphia 76ers. That is cool. This is no doubt for what Kyle Lowry has been throughout his NBA career. This is a guy that's a Hall of Famer, a champion, a multi-time All-Star. But what he is currently is not a guy that's going to help this team win basketball games. Now, to highlight what Lowry said specifically at the tail end of this year, which I think led us all down the pathway of knowing this was coming, is he was asked on his exit interview and said, quote, "I do want to play one more year at a level where I can compete and play and help a team. Even if I'm not playing, I'm just here, or if I am playing, but I still want to play one more year, and hopefully it's here." Now, obviously, Kyle's wish came true there. And I think we all kind of knew the writing was on the wall since that point. Now, this concept of him not needing to play, as he points out in his very own quote, that was my pitch for the best solution of all this, is what would have been the harm with Kyle Lowry hopping right across that line and putting on an assistant coach little polo there, coaching next to Nick Nurse. That is essentially what he's going to be asked to do this year, and I do believe there is value in having a veteran presence on the team. The problem to me with this specific situation, it is not about Kyle Lowry in a vacuum. That if we're just talking about Kyle Lowry as a veteran presence on the team, I can live with that. But we're talking about Kyle Lowry in addition to Eric Gordon, in addition to Andre Drummond. And I think that's 3 roster spots that you're talking about guys that are well past their prime. And frankly, I question if they can contribute at a positive level to this Sixers team. When you're talking about all 3 of them together, that's when we start to get in a bit of a problem here. Now, first, I do want to highlight what Morey said about Kyle Lowry specifically. Before I want to pull up an interesting quote from the beginning of the offseason that did not age exactly well. But when speaking about Lowry, Morey said, quote, "Kyle's championship experience and Hall of Fame resume speaks for itself. He's a proven floor general with tremendous knowledge of the game that is a resource to everyone in the organization. It's only fitting that his 20th NBA season will be right here in Philadelphia, the city that he calls home." And again, I'm happy for Kyle from a human being standpoint here. And to talk back on the assistant coach point, the clear answer to why that is not the case is a little bit of a difference in pay between being on the court and assistant coach there. That Kyle Lowry is still going to pull in over $3 million this year. Not quite the case if you're sitting on the assistant coaching bench there. Those guys are still paid quite well, but not quite NBA minimum salary well. Now, the quote that I did want to pull up from Morey from the beginning of the offseason is one that I think has not aged in the finest of light. As he was asked about what is the biggest mistake that he made for this season coming into the year, and what Morey said was, quote, "I was very focused on finding veteran-type players who generally perform very well in the playoffs, and I didn't put enough emphasis on the team getting through the regular season," Morey said. "So next season, for sure, we will be younger, a more dynamic group." And unfortunately, we are basically running back with the same cast of characters. Now, to give Morey a little bit of love, VJ Edgecombe absolutely going to carry a bulk of this conversation when it comes to athleticism and youth there. And a guy like Trendon Watford, Jabari Walker, you can throw in the conversation there, that there have been steps in that right direction. I'll even include Hunter Salas in the mix on the 2-way contract there. There's guys that will help it overall, but it is kind of rough to actually sit back and think this team won 24 games last year and is just running it back, hoping for better injury luck. Now, that isn't entirely fair to portray in that light there, and I am optimistic about this season. I don't want this to be looking like a huge pessimistic outcome here, but something I did think was noteworthy. And to put those raw numbers on the table for what we're talking about in terms of age is the Sixers' average age on opening night in 24-25, 28.4. The Sixers' average age on opening night in 25-26, assuming Quentin Grimes is back, is 27.1. And Austin Carell says it's possible that there could be some unforeseen changes between now and the start of the season, but 14 roster spots filled. Grimes' deal would make 15, so it feels like a fair estimate of what the opening night roster will look like. And that is a little bit, I would say, concerning to me, as we basically know what the team is going to be, and it isn't guys that we feel that differently about. Now, granted, there's no way around addressing here that the reason that last season went off the rails was almost exclusively due to injuries and not getting a sample size of the top players playing together. We saw 15 games that Joel Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey shared the floor together. We saw Joel Embiid play the fewest games of his career since that he did get activated from those foot injuries early on there. We saw Paul George be limited to 41 games. Jared McCain limited to 23 games. There's a lot of issues and a lack of availability that was the clear problem here, but nonetheless, we are still running back this same approach. Now, when it comes to the roster overall here, I did want to bring this back to the topic of conversation, is I do think it's important to maximize every single roster space. I think that was a lesson that needed to be learned, a lesson, by the way, that Daryl Morey had addressed head on himself, and I think needs to be taken a little bit. There is one particular name that I would keep my eye out in the coming weeks, and that would be Ricky Council IV here. He's on a non-guaranteed contract. He's on a very cheap contract by NBA standards, but that is a guy that I wholeheartedly look at and understand is not an NBA player to any capacity at this point. It's disappointing. Nothing against Ricky as an individual. Have interviewed him a couple times. Good dude. Rooted for him, the Blue Coats, a bunch, but I just don't see the vision from him, certainly not on the Sixers team, or to be frank, not really in the NBA, that I think the three-point percentage has dipped too significantly. And for a guy who basically thrives in madness, a season where he had so much opportunity to present and cement himself in the NBA, he just did not do that there. And I do wonder, as they look to maximize each of these roster spots, with having, Kyle Lowry being the vet to Jared McCain, with Eric Gordon being the vet to VJ Edgecombe there, would they be more value in getting a guy that can directly contribute over Ricky Council, who I don't think we fully have a belief in at this stage in the game? Will be interesting to see if those are the actions that they do go down. But nonetheless, Kyle Lowry coming back for one last ride. For Kyle specifically, happy, I guess, that he's around here. I would have used this roster spot in a better way, and a player that I believe could impact more on the floor. But if they do feel there is that legitimate need for having a voice, having a guy who still keeps in frequent conversation with Jared McCain, that I do think there's a genuine relationship there, and there is something to having a guy like that as a, piece of your support system, a guy who is in your corner the way that Kyle will be with Jared. And just from a stylistic and size standpoint, that Kyle's a dude who obviously found a way to survive and thrive at the NBA. A little bit slender of frame and on the smaller size there, still found a way to get a job done. There's a lot of lessons that can be learned from that. So I'm not going to have any hate in my heart for Kyle Lowry. Welcome back to Philadelphia. Again, not exactly how to use the roster spots, but this is something I think we all saw coming for several weeks now, and I don't have quite the energy to get all fired up and infuriated over something that I had accepted as fact a couple weeks ago. But let me know if you guys are feeling differently in the comments. Let it rip. This is a safe space. If you want to get those Kyle Lowry takes out there, you can drop them in the comments below. As always, appreciate each and every one of you guys tuning into this video here. Make sure you're smashing that subscribe button if you have not already. Drop a like on this video, and I'll be back talking to you next time right here on Sixers Digest. Peace.